Now, tip number 4 is to align your redlining style and your negotiation style. What do I mean by this? There are 5 main types of negotiation styles. And I'm going to go through them, and then we're going to talk about how this reflects on your redlining style, because your red lines are probably going to be the first impression that the other side sees from you in terms of your negotiation style. And your red lines, they send a message. Whether we realize it or not, they send a message. You can open a red line and you can think, whoa, this party's pretty reasonable. Or you can open a red line and think, oh my God, this negotiation is going to take forever. So there's 5 different negotiation styles. There's accommodating, which is maybe when one party has a lot less negotiation power, bargaining power than the other side, and they just really want this deal and they really want this customer because, you know, they're going to be able to advertise it and market it. And so they want to be super accommodating, like whatever they want, we'll take it. We want this deal to close. And then there's avoiding. Avoiding is either postponing the discussion for another time or avoiding responding. You know, this happens when there's big lulls in between conversations. Maybe the other side is avoiding, and maybe they're using that tactic with silence and avoidance to further their position in the negotiation. Collaborative is what I talk about a lot in contract redlining etiquette and with my redlining principles is, you know, in the commercial setting, it's very powerful to have more of a collaborative approach to negotiation and find solutions that result in a win-win for each side. Competitive, this happens more with litigation, settlement agreements, business disputes. The parties are usually being competitive with one another, maybe mergers and acquisitions, transactions. There is a winner, there's a loser. They're not really looking at the interest of the other. So we try to avoid that in the commercial setting. And then there's compromising. Compromising is kind of like collaborative, but it's more like saying, okay, I know I'm not going to get what I want, and they're not going to get exactly what they want, but maybe there's a third solution where we can each get like a little bit of what we want. So how does this reflect in the red line? I'm going to show you some actual examples, but you know, if you're being accommodating, you're just accepting all the red lines that you see and then sending them back. You're like, good, I'm done. And that's considered a pretty easy negotiation for the other side. And we're running this poll right now, and go ahead and tell me what your go-to negotiation style is. This is like, what are you most drawn to immediately when you start negotiating? What's your go-to approach? I'm curious to see this. I see a lot of collaborative so far, which is awesome. Now, avoiding are when folks ignore markups, they ignore your red lines, you ask questions in the comment, they don't respond to it. Collaborative is when we're using red lines plus explanatory comments plus email, like Jessica and I were just describing. Competitive is maybe they are responding to your explanatory comment, but they're being curt. They're saying things like, that's totally unreasonable, or we could never accept this, you know, and they're being a little bit competitive, or they're sending red lines in PDF that can come off as like, the door is closed, we don't care what you think, we take it or leave it type of situation. So here's an example of redlining, and let's say that you received this set of red lines from a counterparty, and you opened it up. What would be your first impression of what their negotiation style is? You can put it in the chats. What do you think their negotiation style would be? Accommodating, competitive, compromising? So the answer is that it's kind of competitive or avoiding. Why? Because they put a lot of red lines and no explanatory comments. They're not being very helpful. They're not being very, very proactive, right? Now, whether they intended to come off that way or not is unclear, but this is how it can be received on the receiving end, right? So how about something like this, where we get the same set of red lines, but we also get some explanatory comments that are explaining the reasoning for these changes? This probably comes off a little bit more collaborative and compromising. So this is more like, okay, we know that we're introducing a lot of changes here, but this is why, and this is why it's important to us. So a little bit more inviting. Jessica, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that this is poor drafting. Oh, that was my first takeaway, is that when I'm going to introduce a lot of concepts, I try to do it with the least amount of words possible to make it seem very, very innocuous. To go back to the style, your comments, really for me, it should be mostly collaborative because the two parties at the table. And when it's under the legal review stage, that means both parties want the deal done. If it's not collaborative, that's a problem, unless you're pulling an ultimate power move and you have all the leverage and you can be an avoider. And that's also a tactic to win. So my thoughts here is this person, I've seen AI write better termination clauses, and you can make it more innocuous and get buy-in from the other side. But yeah, so I would say do it with less words. And if you're going to do it that many words, then definitely add comments, because it looks scary. Like you just dipped it in red ink.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so it's not just about leaving comments explaining the changes, but also being reasonable with your drafting when you're trying to change or move the needle on a complex clause. Because again, it's complex. So there's a lot for both sides to think about. You want to make it as simple and convenient as possible for the other side to say yes. And so we've taken the poll, and 79% of you all already have a collaborative negotiation style. So the takeaway that I want you to think about is, do your red lines match with your intended negotiation style? If they do, then they should be more, concisely drafted proposed changes with helpful explanatory comments that are proactively addressing the why and the because of the reason for the change. Now, for those of you who said you're not really avoiding, here's another tip I want to give you. Sometimes you can change up your negotiation style. We shouldn't only commit to one negotiation style, but if you're, depending on who your counterparty is and what their style is, how close you are to quarter end or your deadline, you may want to switch up your negotiation style a little bit. And, sometimes when we come to complex clauses, maybe we do avoid it. Like, I like to save complex clauses for the end, especially limitation of liability and indemnification, because I want to understand where the other risks will land first before I commit. So it is a little bit avoidant, but I do reserve my opportunity to come back to it. I'll leave a comment that says reserve for review in the next turn, so that the parties don't think I've accepted that clause, but they also understand that I'm looking to see how other items land. Maybe the parties are still involved in commercial negotiations and we don't know what the annual fee is going to be. So then how can I calculate what the limitation of liability monetary cap is going to be, right? So we may want to push it purposefully for later, but again, it's still in the collaborative spirit.